Desire, it's one of the most mysterious forces between two people. You can't buy it, you can't beg for it, and you certainly can't force it into existence. And yet, there are moments when you find yourself drawn to someone who seems completely unmoved by your presence. It leaves you wondering, is desire something we can awaken? Or is it simply a spark that either exists or doesn't? Desire cannot be demanded because it doesn't respond to pressure, persuasion, or performance, it responds to energy. When you try to convince a woman to want you, even with the best intentions, you unintentionally create tension that pushes her further away. Human attraction operates on an instinctive level, and when someone senses you are trying to pull something from them, validation, attention, affection, it disrupts the natural flow of connection. Desire thrives in spaciousness, in curiosity, in the sense that a person is drawn toward you rather than pushed. This is why presence matters more than pursuit. Presence is the quiet, grounded confidence of a man who is comfortable in his skin, who doesn't seek constant reassurance, and who doesn't collapse when a woman seems distant or uncertain. It's the atmosphere you carry, the subtle cues of someone who knows his value, who listens without needing to be impressive, who allows silence instead of rushing to fill it. Confidence, too, is not loud or forceful, it's a steady internal alignment. A woman becomes more open to you when she feels your steadiness rather than your urgency. If she senses you are overly invested in her response, she instinctively pulls back because the dynamic becomes unbalanced. But when your confidence is rooted in who you are rather than how she reacts, she feels free, not responsible for your emotional state, and freedom is the soil where desire grows. Emotional depth adds another layer. Many men misunderstand desire as something purely physical, but emotional resonance is what makes someone linger in another person's mind. Showing emotional depth doesn't mean oversharing or performing vulnerability. It means expressing your feelings with clarity and honesty without placing emotional weight on her. It means showing curiosity about her world without trying to impress or decode her. When you combine presence, confidence, and emotional depth, you create a magnetic field around you. Not because you are trying to seduce her, but because you are engaging with life in a fuller way. A woman becomes drawn to a man who is balanced, attentive, but not needy, expansive, but not overwhelming, grounded, but not detached. This is how desire begins, quietly, almost imperceptibly, as she starts to feel safe in your presence without being obligated, as she feels intrigued by the layers of you that are revealed naturally, not pushed onto her. Desire is inspired when she can sense that you are deeply connected to yourself first, because the way you relate to yourself becomes the way she experiences you. A woman becomes drawn to a man who is rooted in self-respect because self-respect shapes every interaction, every boundary, and every signal you communicate without saying a word. When you approach someone from a place of insecurity or desperation, even subtly, it creates a dynamic where you are seeking approval rather than connection. And approval-seeking energy is one of the fastest ways to diminish attraction because it shifts you into a position of emotional dependence. A woman can feel when you're trying too hard, when her interest becomes a measure of your worth, or when you adjust yourself excessively to fit what you think she wants. Instead of feeling drawn in, she feels pressured to validate you, and desire does not grow in a space where one person feels responsible for the emotional stability of the other. Self-respect means you don't chase someone who isn't meeting you halfway. It doesn't mean you give up easily, it means you don't abandon yourself in the process of pursuing another person. It means you know when to initiate and when to step back, when to express interest and when to allow space, when to lean in and when to hold your ground. This kind of balance is attractive because it signals emotional maturity. A woman doesn't want a man who needs her to feel whole. She desires someone who chooses her but doesn't collapse without her. When you are rooted in self-respect, you naturally communicate boundaries without needing to declare them. You don't tolerate disrespectful behavior, mixed signals, or emotional breadcrumbs just because you desire her. You're able to admire her beauty, her intelligence, her presence, but you don't pedestalize her, because doing so creates inequality in the dynamic. Attraction grows when two people meet eye to eye, not when one person stands below the other hoping to be noticed. You also become more intentional when you're grounded in self-respect. You don't exaggerate your qualities or hide your flaws to be more appealing. You show up authentically, recognizing that the right connection requires truth, not performance. This authenticity becomes magnetic because it is rare. People who respect themselves aren't afraid of rejection, not because they are indifferent, but because rejection doesn't define their worth. A woman becomes more drawn to a man who can stand on his own foundation, who doesn't crumble when interest isn't immediately reciprocated, and who doesn't try to win someone at the cost of losing himself. This steadiness invites curiosity, safety, and admiration. It creates a dynamic where she feels the freedom to be herself without carrying the weight of your expectations, and in that freedom, genuine desire begins to grow. Authentic connection grows when you become curious instead of needy, expressive instead of silent, and grounded instead of reactive. Curiosity is one of the most powerful forces in attraction because it shifts your focus from trying to make her want you to genuinely wanting to understand who she is. When you approach a woman with real interest that isn't tied to an agenda or an outcome, you create an environment where she feels seen rather than evaluated. People naturally open up when they sense that someone is curious about their inner world without trying to extract something from them. Curiosity softens the space between two individuals because it removes pressure and replaces it with presence. Neediness, on the other hand, collapses that space. When you seek constant certainty, does she like me? Is she interested? What does this message mean? You subtly communicate that your emotional balance depends on her responses. This makes her feel boxed in rather than drawn in. Attraction requires room to breathe, and neediness tightens that room until the connection suffocates. By choosing curiosity over neediness, you shift into a more open, present energy. You listen more deeply. You observe without assumption. You engage without taking her reactions personally. Expression is equally important. Many men go silent out of fear of being too forward, too emotional, too honest. But silence often gets misinterpreted as disinterest, insecurity, or emotional unavailability. When you express yourself with calm clarity, your thoughts, your humor, your appreciation, you create an emotional texture she can feel. Expression builds connection because it invites reflection. It gives her something to respond to, something to lean into. Emotional expression doesn't mean oversharing or drowning her in your feelings, it means allowing her to experience you as a real, layered human being. Groundedness is the container that holds both curiosity and expression. When you are grounded, you don't react impulsively to her moods, delays, or uncertainty. You don't spiral when she takes time to reply or becomes distant. Instead, you remain anchored in your own emotional center, responding thoughtfully rather than erupting emotionally. This steadiness allows her to relax in your presence because she isn't bracing for volatility. She senses that you are not easily shaken, that you are in control of yourself, and that your interest in her isn't fragile. When curiosity, expression, and groundedness work together, they create a connection that feels safe yet alive, stable yet intriguing. She begins to experience you not as someone trying to win her favor but as someone she genuinely enjoys being around. Desire grows naturally in this emotional landscape because she feels both understood and free, both engaged and unpressured, and that balance is what makes connection flourish. Attraction blooms in the space you create, not the space you invade, because desire needs room to unfold at its own pace. When you try to force closeness or accelerate emotional intimacy, you unintentionally intrude on the very space where attraction would have grown. People don't desire what overwhelms them, they desire what invites them. Creating space is not about being distant or aloof, but about allowing a natural rhythm to emerge between two people. It means understanding that interest doesn't grow under pressure, and emotional connection doesn't develop when one person is constantly pushing for more time, more attention, or more validation than the other is ready to give. Boundaries play a vital role in this. When you have boundaries, you don't let your desire for someone override your sense of self or your life outside the connection. You don't wait by your phone, adjust your entire schedule around her, or abandon your own commitments just to make yourself more available. Instead, you show that your world is full, rich, and meaningful, and that she is invited into it rather than depended upon. This subtle but powerful difference changes the dynamic. A woman feels more drawn to someone who has a life she can admire and explore rather than someone who is seeking to merge with her out of emptiness or fear of being alone. Mystery is another element that naturally arises within healthy space. Mystery doesn't mean playing games or withholding affection, It means you don't rush to reveal everything about yourself at once. Humans are wired to be intrigued by what unfolds slowly. When you give her the chance to discover you over time, your interests, your values, your humor, your emotional world, you create anticipation, curiosity, and emotional engagement. Revealing yourself in layers allows her to feel like she is exploring something real, something with depth, something that isn't trying to impress but simply exists in a grounded, authentic way. Genuine self-expression thrives in space as well. When you're not over-invested in controlling the outcome or trying to earn her attention, you communicate more honestly. You can share your thoughts with clarity instead of anxiety, speak your desires without fear, and show affection in a way that feels natural rather than calculated. This authenticity becomes magnetic because it conveys confidence and emotional maturity, qualities that make a woman feel safe enough to reciprocate. When you create space, not by withdrawing, but by staying rooted in your own life while inviting connection, you allow desire to emerge organically. She doesn't feel pressured to respond, perform, or accelerate the relationship. Instead, she has room to feel, to explore, and to choose, and that sense of freedom makes your presence more compelling. In that open, breathable space, attraction doesn't just appear, it deepens. The fastest way to make someone desire you is to elevate your own energy, your life, and your emotional intelligence so deeply that she becomes intrigued by the world you inhabit. Attraction is not something you chase, it is something you radiate. When you invest in your growth, mentally, emotionally, physically, you shift the entire way people experience you. A woman becomes curious when she senses that you live with purpose, that your days are filled with meaning, and that you are building a life that feels expansive rather than stagnant. This kind of energy draws people in because it is rare to find someone who is genuinely alive, inspired, and connected to something larger than themselves. When you elevate your life, you create a gravitational pull. You are no longer waiting for someone to choose you, you are choosing yourself, your path, and your evolution. This self-investment makes you more confident without trying, more stable without forcing it, and more captivating because you embody motion rather than stagnation. A woman feels this shift immediately. She notices your clarity, your discipline, your standards, and your ambition. Even if she wasn't initially interested, she becomes intrigued because your growth signals possibility, strength, and emotional presence. Emotional intelligence also plays a central role in creating desire. When you understand your own emotions, you stop reacting impulsively or taking things personally. You listen differently, you respond differently, and you hold yourself with a kind of grounded maturity that makes her feel safe and unpressured. Emotional intelligence means you communicate with nuance, you express your thoughts with honesty, and you handle discomfort without shutting down or exploding. This emotional steadiness is deeply attractive because it allows intimacy to grow naturally. A woman becomes more receptive when she feels she can be herself without being judged, rushed, or misunderstood. Elevating your energy also includes how you move through the world. The hobbies you pursue, the friendships you maintain, the discipline you cultivate, and even the way you speak about your dreams all shape how someone perceives you. When you are lit up by your life, you become a source of inspiration rather than someone waiting for inspiration from others. You show that you are capable of joy, passion, and self-direction. This independence is magnetic because it signals that being with you is an addition to her world, not an obligation. As you elevate your energy and life, something subtle but transformative happens. You no longer try to be chosen. Instead, you embody a presence that naturally draws interest. She starts to notice the way you carry yourself, the way you think, the way you handle challenges, and the way you live with purpose. Desire grows not because you try harder, but because you become a man whose world is worth entering.